Hey, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is me, Lisa Knox, owner and founder of LM Knox Law and Mediation, serving the great state of Florida right here in Tampa Bay. I'm reaching out to you all. You know, it's time again. It's time for our bi-weekly little chat, little conversation. And so I'm so excited tonight. You know, I was thinking about what should I talk with my people about tonight? And you know what? I was reminded we just hit the Super Bowl of romance, shall we say. The Super Bowl of romance, and that's none other than February 14th, Valentine's Day. I will say that I am a sucker for love. I love love. I love the feeling of love being in the air, you know. I love a good romance story. I love the story of two people finding each other in this sea of 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 all these humans who can interact, and two people finding their way to each other with their hearts. Ava. Mhm. But with the Super Bowl of love, Valentine's Day, a lot of times people will get proposed to and they will say yes. And so now we have couples who have become engaged. And the world is different now because you are now somebody's intended. So this is an appropriate time, an apt time, a perfect time, shall I say, for us to discuss what I think it could be one of the most romantic things that a couple can do: prenuptial agreements. Okay, so, all right, I'm taking my glasses off, okay? Because hear me out, all right? Prenuptial agreements. When we think of prenuptial agreements, maybe you get these different connotations like, oh, you don't trust me. Or, oh, that's my intended, that's my fiance, intending that we're not going to make it, that we're going to get divorced. Let me give you a different perspective. When you all propose to each other, when one person gets down on their knee or, makes a phone call or turns to the other person, whatever way it happens, and says, will you do the honor of sharing your life with me as my spouse? Guess what? Once the other person says yes, that is such a time filled with love, right? And so you have these great plans on planning a wedding and what life is going to be like after you say I do and so forth, right? But this is also a time where you can't imagine thinking the worst of that person or being in a horrible situation with that person, which makes it the absolute perfect time for you to say, hey, let's plan now. Let's plan now with the prenuptial agreement because I love you now more than I could ever possibly imagine. So I can make decisions out of that love, out of that respect, out of that excitement that I have for what's good for you, right? And prenuptial agreements, even postnuptial agreements, it's not like, hey, I think we're going to get divorced. Prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, they make plans for even if, God forbid, one of you passes away, right? So it's not like, and it doesn't have to be the quintessential, if we get divorced, everything I bring, I take, and everything you brought, you take. No, it can be a whole bunch of things. This is really important in situations sort of like myself, where, you are of a mature age. Maybe you've been married before. Maybe you have children from previous relationships. Perhaps you've already started your own business, or you've already bought your own house, or maybe you have some assets, some investments, things like that, and it allows you to say, hey, let me protect this for my child or for my beneficiaries that are born outside of, this relationship. It also allows you to protect your intended, your fiance. Give you an example. If you have a house, right, that you bought, let's say 10 years from now, or 10 years ago, and you have children, and let's say, you've already made a will where your children get the house, you'd already intended on leaving that sort of as their inheritance. God forbid, if you pass away, right, then technically, unless you all have refinanced the house, or you've added your spouse to the deed, technically they don't have an interest per se in that house. Now there's some more different things that go on into that, but just for these purposes, let's say, just broadly, they don't have like a full interest in that house. So a lot of times that's when children from previous relationships, people get funny about money and property. Children from previous relationships can say, hey, you know what? I know my parent bought this house before they got married to you, and they bought it for me, so I need you to get out. But you know what you can do in your prenuptial agreement or in your postnuptial agreement? You can say, hey, I intend on leaving this house once I pass away. If I pass away and I'm still married to this person, I want them to have a life estate in this house. Maybe it can be, hey, they can live in this house for as long as they survive, or as long as they're not remarried to someone else, or as long as they don't move a lover in or whatever, right? And my children cannot get rid of that house. They can have a place to stay. It can be as simple as that, right? If you want to make some clear, definitive things that your spouse should be able to be entitled to outside of what your children have, that's a great way to do it. Now, it's not going to be replacing your estate planning, but it acts in conjunction with. Okay. But then let's think about this. How about, what if, I'm a little nervous, I want us to last forever. Maybe we won't last forever, but I want to make sure that they're always taken care of. And I want to make sure I'm always taken care of. Okay. You can make decisions like that in a prenuptial agreement. If you have a business, especially if you have partners in your business, right? You may want a prenuptial agreement because, God forbid, if you all get a divorce, depending on how that business is set up, that divorce could definitely be of detriment to your business. What you don't want to do is have to give up shares, voting shares, to your possible ex-spouse. You want that. You don't want your ex-spouse to be entitled to portions of your business that has grown or expanded, unless that's exactly what you intend on doing, right? So those are things. And you're free to contract about a whole bunch of things. Now, in prenuptial agreements and postnuptial agreements, the only thing you cannot contract about, you can't contract and say, oh, well, if we have children and we get divorced, then the children will spend this amount of time with me and this amount of time with my spouse. You can't do that because that's against public policy. We look at the best interests of the children. You can't contract for things like sex. You can't say, well, if we're married or whatever, and my spouse has to give me, has to have sex with me 5 times a week. If they don't have sex with me 5 times a week and I divorce them, then they owe me $1 million. You can't do that. Really, that's against public policy as well, right? But you know what you can do? You can say, hey, you know what? For every year that we are married, God forbid if we get a divorce, for every year that we are married and there's no infidelity, or for every year that we're married, just in general, this person is entitled to this amount. It could be like, the Jenny Mai Jeezy situation, where it's like, hey, we can get a divorce and you get nothing unless I had an adulterous affair. Wow. Because you see, they're in court, and they're trying to get that all wrapped up. Jeannie said, hey, I'm not going to walk away with nothing. You had an affair, right? A prenuptial agreement cannot prevent either of you from filing for divorce for specific reasons. But it can say, hey, before the parties file for divorce, they're going to agree to attend marital therapy for 6 months. I've seen that in prenuptial agreements. So sometimes it can be used to really support, your marriage, to really encourage good behaviors in your marriage, and to actually to sort of boast your marriage up in times of peril, because marriage is not easy. I hate to break it to y'all, but I'm going to tell you the truth. Marriage is not easy. Sometimes life comes along and completely just lifes things up. And you all know what I mean. It gets challenging. And with a marriage, every day you have to say, I choose you. I choose this marriage. I choose to stay in this. And sometimes, love is not enough. But if you do your prenuptial agreement or your postnuptial agreement at a time, in a place, in a space where you can act in love, right? Then it prevents you, God forbid, if things break down or if one of you passes away, it prevents you from having to sling dirt or from trying to make decisions and divisions when the love is gone, Because what is that song, After the Love is Gone? Let me tell you what happens after the love is gone. Typically, people cannot get along. That should be the rest of the song. Typically, people cannot get along. So I encourage you, if you love your intended, if you love your fiance, if you love your soon-to-be spouse, if you love your spouse now, right? But you want to have something in place in case things don't work out the way you all expect, so that you all can still be respectful. You all can still, walk away with that same kindness that you felt towards each other before. Then I would encourage you to look at prenuptial agreements, and I would encourage you to look at postnuptial agreements. The difference, really quick, answering a question that someone just sent me as a text. The difference between a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement. A prenuptial agreement is before you get married, okay? A postnuptial agreement is after you get married, okay? I have another text here that okay, yes. Someone just asked me, hey, do you have to go by the agreement? Here's the truth. The truth is, no, you don't, right? So a prenuptial agreement, a postnuptial agreement, it does not prevent you all from starting businesses together. It doesn't prevent you from adding your partner to the business that you have, or adding your partner's name to the deed of the property that you have. It doesn't prevent you from doing any of that. It doesn't prevent you from giving your partner gifts or anything like that. You can do all of those things. And essentially what happens is whatever is applicable in that prenuptial agreement, that postnuptial agreement, still remains. But let's say you decide, you know what? We are solid as a rock. If you thought about that song as I'm saying it, then congratulations, you all are my people. Solid as a rock, right? But let's say that y'all are solid as a rock. You're a couple of years in, you've done a prenuptial agreement. Guess what? It's not difficult to go ahead and then, rescind that prenuptial agreement. That's not difficult to do. You can unwind that prenuptial agreement. You can go ahead and say, hey, you know what? We no longer want to abide by that, and make that prenuptial agreement null and void. Now, I will tell you this, a couple of more pieces of advice. And once again, this is not legal advice. This is life advice. Okay. When doing a prenuptial agreement, this is not the time for you to save money and do it, yourselves. Oh, I'm going to write it on a piece of paper and we're both going to sign it and notarize it. Listen, I am also a notary. I know there's some power in the notary stamp, but it's not that powerful. You have to do a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement in specific ways to make sure that it is valid and that the validity of it can't be challenged. Okay. Because what's the point of doing it if a court can't enforce it? Right. So I would not encourage someone to try and do it themselves. I would encourage you to get an attorney. I would encourage you both to have separate attorneys, because once again, you want that validity of that agreement to be tight. You want every T crossed and every I dotted. You want it to be tight. You want it to be right. Okay. But I will tell you, and also I would not advise you to do the whole, we're going to write it out, sign it, notarize it, and then file it with the clerk or something. Listen, you don't want to do that either. You don't want to do that. The agreement for a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement really only comes into play, God forbid, if you all are facing a divorce or death. Until then, it's, in your lockbox. Okay. So to wrap it all up, because I'm not going to keep you all for a long time, I will say this again. A prenuptial agreement, a postnuptial agreement is by far one of the best ways to say, I love you. I want to make sure that you are protected, and I want to make sure that our relationship is protected. Let us do this first step together as a couple and handle our business. All right? If you have any other questions about prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, or anything of the like, I would encourage you to speak with an attorney of your choice. Now, if you do not know a family law attorney, or if you need to get in touch with a family law attorney and you're not sure where to turn, you can reach out to us. We'll get you in the right direction. All right. But in the meantime, and in between time, that's my piece of wisdom for you. And I will see you all not next week, but the following week. And side note, if you are in love, and if you are engaged, or even if you're not engaged, but you're just happy and you have joy and love, even if it's with yourself, congratulations. Because like Sister Whitney Houston said, love is the greatest gift of all. All right, y'all. I'll talk to you later. Take care.